Hello, everyone. I thought I'd do one more drawing relaxation exercise and one that's not focused on any sort of like counseling related stuff. It's more just about relaxation. So we'll look at my piece of paper here. So I'm kind of basing this a little bit off of Zentangle, but I can't officially teach Zentangle. You have to go like through a special training. I didn't do that training. So this isn't officially Zentangle. But for those who are doodlers and who may be familiar with Zentangle, you're probably aware that there's a lot of crossover. It's just formal doodling. Zentangle gets a little bit deeper into design and all of that, which we're not going to go too much into. We're just doodling. But there's some things that I like about Zentangle that I think I'm going to apply here, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for using some of their ideas. So you can use any sheet of size of paper. Some people, if they're doing actual Zentangle, they'll use something small because the idea is to like get really intricate. I'm just going to use a regular piece of paper because I think that's what most people probably have access to. Regular printer paper, nothing special. First, you want to figure out how much space you want to use. Do you want to use the whole piece of paper, or do you just want to use a section of the piece of paper? Maybe you're also journaling at some point and you just want a space for the drawing piece. Maybe you're taking notes and you want like to go down the side to have a doodling section next to your notes. So those are things to consider. So for the sake of this exercise, I'm just going to create kind of like a random shape that I want to work within. And then the idea is that you want to make sure that your border is really clear and defined. You may decide to go outside of that border, completely acceptable. But at least then you know the space you're trying to work within. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is figure out how you're going to section out this shape. So you can use wavy lines, you can use straight lines. You want to make sure you have, I don't know, I would say like 3 to 4 sections within your space. You could go with more, but you may want to start simple. So for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to kind of do curve, and then I'm going to do a straight line. I'm going to make it a little fancy here. And then I'm going to do another straight line. So these are going to be my spaces. And each space is going to have its own theme. You don't have to do it this way. I just wanted to kind of teach you a kind of like structured way to doodle. Now I'm using a pencil. I like the fine tip like mechanical pencils. It just gives me a little bit more control over the lines I'm drawing. Some people like working in pen so that you never are able to fix mistakes, because sometimes that can be kind of rewarding, like just go with what happens and like make it work. But I also have like pens and highlighters and stuff too, just to kind of show different ways you can do things. So if I were like, I know I want this border, I don't want to go outside of it, I don't want to change it, I could then take my pen and make sure that I'm committing to this shape. And let's say, and then go back later and erase like any weird stuff where like things don't line up quite right with my pencil and my pen. So again, I'm going to choose to commit to this shape. So I'm going to go over with pen. All right, now I'm going to commit a little bit further. Now that I've kind of drawn out a fun shape, committed to it, I'm going to take a marker just because I want to have a little fun. But you can just with whatever materials you have available. And let me actually get something to go underneath since this pen might bleed. I don't want to get all over my desk. Okay. So first you're going to pick a pattern. And you can pick any kind of pattern. The idea is to have it be really simple. And so the first pattern I'm going to use is going to be like a swirl pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl around the edge of one of my spaces. And I'm going to leave space in between each of the swirls so that I can go back and add complicating pieces to make it more intricate. So for now, just going around, leaving space. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of build inward. So keep doing the swirls and build it off of the swirls that already exist. And obviously your space is going to get smaller in the middle. So you may have to skip over some of your swirls in order to fit everything. And this doesn't have to be like perfectly symmetrical or anything like that. Again, this is for relaxation. So sometimes just repetitive drawing can be very relaxing. So I'll do that. Okay, so I've kind of filled in my space. And now to add a little bit of more interest here, I'm going to choose to add dots around the border where there's space. And I'm purposefully choosing stuff that isn't specifically Zentangle since I'm not a trainer. I could go into their types of designs, but I'm purposefully not doing that. All right. Now I look at mine and I kind of go, you know, that's like nice and all, but it just feels like there's a lot of empty space. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to pick a highlighter. And I'm actually going to create like a shadow around all the swirls. And if you're someone who likes to get really detailed, you could even choose to just do it all in like that really fine tip pencil or a really fine tip pen and see how much you can fit into a space. But for the sake of this, I'm going to keep it relatively simple. All right, and now looking at some more, I'm like, yeah, that's a little bit more going on there. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to kind of I want to shade in kind of the border area. So you could follow along and doing exactly what I'm doing, or you could kind of take these steps and make them your own. So maybe you're like, I'm not a big swirly person, but I sure do like drawing flowers. So I'm going to draw little mini flowers and keep that space in between. If you have something like a smudge pencil or something that can like bleed a little bit, like maybe some watercolor, sometimes that can be fun because then you can have these really intricate designs, but then the color or the shading can kind of get messy, which adds some interesting contrast. All right, and lastly, I think what I want to do is I'm going to grab my purple again, and I'm just going to add more dots into that space just to kind of give it a little bit more complexity. And I'm kind of rushing through this. If I were doing this purely as a relaxation exercise, I'd probably spend a lot more time just like breathing, enjoying what I'm doing, not thinking about anything else. If I noticed that my mind was moving around and thinking about things, I might be like, I'm just going to focus on making dots. And kind of like meditation, it's like inevitable that your mind is going to wander. And the practice is not to punish yourself for not concentrating on just the dot making, but instead just be like, I've noticed that my mind has wandered. And I'm going to choose to go back and just think about dots. And that's the practice. All right. So now I have a little detailed square. Nothing too fancy, right? It doesn't make me look like I'm like the best artist in the whole wide world. That's not the point. All right, and then I'm going to choose the next section. And for this section, I'm thinking that I want to go with like a checkerboard pattern. So you could, with me, I have a round spot. But if you were doing a checkerboard in like a square, you could go with the lines you already have and have a parallel. Or you could kind of go against the lines that you have and create something a little bit more fun. So it's up to you what you want to do. You pick the angle that you want to go at if you're doing these checkerboard pieces. Again, if your lines aren't perfect, that's okay. You don't need to grab a ruler and have everything be even. You can if that makes you feel better. You're welcome to. And for checkerboard, the biggest key, if you actually want it to be relatively even, is to try to keep, so I have these lines going this direction. I want to keep the lines going against that about the same distance as these original lines, and that will give me a square versus a rectangle. All right, so I have a little kind of checkerboard pattern. And what I'm going to do in mine is I'm going to create a line down the middle of like the diamond shaped part. And I'm going to do that with every other, all right, so let me figure out, like every other square box. So I'm going to look at it with me like triangles, and in every triangle top, I'm going to go through. My phone's ringing, but I'm in the middle of recording, so I'm going to ignore it. So now I've got a little bit more interesting of a design now that I put those lines through, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some color. So for me, so I have my lines that go down the middle of the kind of like the triangle diamond area, and I'm going to go every other is going to be blue. So you can see my line here is kind of the base, and the triangles that fall along the line are kind of doing this zigzaggy pattern. And when I get to my next line, I want to make sure it's doing the same. Oh, let's see, I want to go opposite actually, so that the triangles don't touch each other. Let's see, is that right? I want to go the same. And you really want to make sure to go all the way to the edge too. So if you find there's like a partial piece over here, just see if you can find what would make sense in that partial piece. All right, so now my design looks something like that. And I've decided I really want to make those lines where the triangle's going back and forth really apparent. So I'm going to actually go back and pen with that so that I can track this a little bit better. Okay, so you can see I have stronger lines in there now. And I'm going to do the same ziggy-zaggy, but I'm going to do it with a different color. If you were doing this with just like a pencil, you could, instead of doing color, obviously, you could do like how dark you're coloring in, so you don't have to use any sort of color. I'm just using it because I got it, so why not? And you might make mistakes, especially when you get something complicated like this. That's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. This is just a doodle, not a big deal. So now we have almost like a flag appearance. If I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I don't want to spend a ton of time, but let's say I want to fill in these spaces here, I might actually choose to kind of just make squares within squares within squares. And that way I'm getting more time with this doodle. So it might look something like that one there, and I can do that in every single space. All right, for my third space, what I'm going to do is trying to figure out the best way to do this in this space. And you may have to like look at what you have and go like, what do I feel like would just look good there? Or look around your space, be like, what kind of shapes do I see that I would like to recreate in this drawing? So instead of having like these kind of really basic things this time, I'm gonna do something that's gonna purposefully have mistakes in it because there's no way to make everything the same. I'm gonna do hearts around the whole border. And I don't know about you, but I cannot make every heart look exactly the same. That's just not happening. And you may find it's like if you turn your paper, if you're starting to get like weird angles and like shapes aren't looking like you want them to anymore, if you just change the paper angle, you might be able to get that better shape that you were looking for. And this time I chose not to leave a lot of space in between, just because I'm trying not to spend a ton of time on this. I just want to give you an example of what this could look like. So I did a bunch of parts around the border, and I'm going to create a second border. So I'm just going along the top part of those parts to create a new space. So I kind of separate it out. And what I'm going to do is do hearts again. So the interesting thing that some science has shown us is that when we do repetitive activities, it calms down our stress system. So our body often goes into these stress times and your muscles get tense, your digestive system doesn't work very well, your brain goes in circular patterns, and you can get really tired or really like super jazzed up and have a hard time calming down, depending on how your body reacts to stress. And they found that repetitive exercises actually are very, very calming, that it kind of tells the brain like everything's okay, nothing's wrong right now, it's not the end of the world. And that includes sound. So maybe if you're really stressed sometimes, or even while you're doing some design like this, you could listen to music that's very kind of like calming and repetitive. So it could be some, rave music if you wanted to, if you like, or like club music, or it could be something classical, or it could just be like drum sounds, could work really well too. Some people who may be on the spectrum or just have like sensory issues may actually find that like drumming while doodling something simple may feel calming. So kind of just like tapping, right? You think like sometimes when you're stressed, you like hit your, well, this one has it over here, but like hit your like pen or pencil a bunch of times. It's actually your body just trying to calm itself. Maybe you tap your nails or your hands on things and drum. Maybe when you're driving, if you're a driver, maybe you drum on the steering wheel even when there's not music. Those are all just calming things. All right, so now I've got most of that space filled with hearts and borders. In that middle space, I'm just gonna do a big heart. Again, I'm spending lots and lots of time on this. I might choose to color things in. I might choose to do designs within each heart, maybe even just something as simple as like a couple dots. But we're not gonna go that deep right now. I'm gonna skip color for right now. And lastly, I have this really big space, right, that I could do a lot with. For the sake of time, I think what I'm gonna do is similar to the hearts. I'm gonna create a second border around the round part. I want to kind of actually make the space a little bit smaller because it's almost like overwhelming how big it is. So then I'm just going to color in that big border. Sometimes a big space can be like, ooh, there's so much I can do there. And sometimes it can be like, oh boy, that's such a big commitment to do one design in that large space. So you can just divide it up or find ways to make it smaller so it's not so intimidating. Have you ever looked at like a piece of paper when you're supposed to be drawing like for art class or something? You're like, cool, so no big deal, but I have to fill this whole piece of paper and my mind just won't create like an image to work with. And it feels like super stressful. So the point of this is not to be stressed. All right, so now I've done a little bit of border there. And I'm gonna do triangles along the border. So it's super simple, like little shark's teeth. Or little mountains. Okay. And now from every triangle I've drawn, I'm just going to draw a straight line that goes all the way to the edge of my pattern here, or to the area that I've created. So it's right in the middle of those triangles, drawing a straight line. I like the look of straight lines, but you don't have to use straight lines. You can do all kinds of wiggly stuff. It actually creates really cool appearances. So now I've done lines, so kind of got like a sunshiny sort of thing. And I'll do one last thing, and then we'll wrap this up because I know this is getting a little bit long. So I'm just going to do from the top of the little mountains or the triangles, I'm just going to draw a series of green dots just to add a little bit more color here. All right, so not the most intricate of all designs, but you can see how simple this is. The key is on repetition and having some spaces kind of sectioned out so you can just focus on a single design in the repetition part, and that will help your brain kind of calm down, get focused. If you're a perfectionist who likes everything to be perfect, this is maybe not a stress-free exercise. It might be a good challenge, but it might not feel simple to you. But I definitely invite folks to give it a try, see what kind of designs you might come up with. And if you're like in a meeting in the future in your job, or you're, maybe in a online lecture and you're super feeling bored, but you still want to pay attention to what's going on, I invite you to try something like this, because this doesn't take a lot of thought. You can still listen and do something like this. In the end, you'll be able to walk away with something kind of fun. All right, everybody. Hope you have a great day.